If someone told you that Pokemon channel speedruns were pay to win, you'd think they were crazy, right? While it's nowhere near as expensive as getting a high-end PC or anything like that, you'd probably never expect Pokemon channel of all games to have any special requirements for a top time. And while it's nothing as ridiculous as using a hot plate to heat up your console, the requirements for a top time are still some of the more interesting ones out there. You won't believe just what you need to buy in order to achieve a top time in Pokemon channel. Since I started making this video, there has actually been talks of making the main category for the speedrun more fair by adding an auto splitter and banning one of the items. So for the main category, the run will hopefully be more accessible, but just what made this run so pay to win in the first place? To answer that, first we'll have to take a look at the run itself. Pokemon channel is split into 6 days. Every day, you unlock a new set of channels, and in order to progress to the next day, you have to watch all these new channels, which results in a special cutscene letting you know that you've done all the day's activities. Once you're done, you have to stop playing and wait 24 whole hours to progress to the next day. Of course, this isn't Button Kaitos, so you don't have to wait 24 real-life hours to progress. Runners bypass this restriction by restarting their console, going into settings, and changing the date to the next year, which is faster than changing the day or month. This is then done for all 6 in-game days, allowing runners to beat a game that should take over 120 hours in as little as 45 minutes. Because runners have to change their system clock at the end of each day, they have to save and exit out of the game. This leads to our first pay-to-win element, which may or may not be pay-to-win depending on how you see it, and that's having a third-party memory card. Official Nintendo memory cards may be more reliable, but a knockoff memory card saves much faster, saving a handful of seconds since runners need to save the game 5 times total, once for each of the first 5 days before they change the clocks. At least for me, I am fine with these cheap knockoffs. I mean, I've lost all of my save files from years ago because of how bad they are, but I also have no attachment to save files from games I've beaten anyways, so it's what I defaulted to when I ran the game. But anyone who only owns official hardware would have to buy a knockoff memory card just to save a few seconds in the speedrun. A knockoff memory card is pretty normal to own, but this second pay-to-win element is pretty far-fetched. Think you can guess what it is before I reveal the answer? Now then, let's rewind time by 8 years to August of 2016. During this time, there were only 4 of us seriously competing for a world record. Pokehero, who was the world record holder at the time, Simeon, Pearstrike, and myself. During this time, Pearstrike was analyzing Pokehero's run to see where he was losing time and happened to notice that Pokehero loads into the game faster than him for some unknown reason. There was no reason to suspect Pokehero of cheating, of course, so we tried to dig deeper into figuring out why there was a difference in load times. To assist in figuring this out, I took the liberty of putting everyone's runs into a video editor and timed how long it took to go from the disc selection screen to the first frame the game appears, and the results were rather interesting. Out of all of us, Pokehero had the fastest loads at 13.65 seconds. Second was me, who took 13.69 seconds. Third was Pearstrike, who took 14.39 seconds, and fourth was Simeon, who took 14.86 seconds. So while Pokehero and I had essentially the same load time, Pearstrike took an extra 0.7 seconds to load into the game, while Simeon took an extra 1.2 seconds. This was based on the initial load time alone, and because runners have to load the game 5 times, once between each day, that's 3.5 seconds lost for Pearstrike, or 6 seconds lost for Simeon, which is a pretty big chunk of time for a run this short and simple, and this doesn't include any of the other load screens in the game. Because Pokehero and I had similar loads, there must have been some common thread between us and not Pearstrike or Simeon. But what could it be? That's right, the peripheral whose sole purpose is to let you play Game Boy Advance games on your GameCube, for some reason makes Pokemon Channel load up faster. This isn't a universal thing for all games though. A few people tested this when the news first broke out, but it seems to be either a Pokemon Channel exclusive feature or just an overall rare feature that needs to be tested case by case. Thankfully, runners only need the peripheral and not the overpriced disc that came with it. So in total, to run Pokemon Channel efficiently, you need a GameCube with a third-party memory card and a Game Boy player, which is a bit pricey but nothing too expensive. Definitely nothing crazy like the cost of a powerful PC. But it's a lot more than anyone should ever have to spend purely for speedrunning a meme game. For anyone who has any plans of running the game now though, there's talks of banning third-party memory cards and adding an auto-splitter, which would ignore load times and timing runs in order to negate all these costs and simply require you to have an official GameCube and memory card, though a final decision hasn't been made yet. But it would mean that moving forwards, there's a chance Pokemon Channel will finally be a fair run for everyone, as long as they own official hardware. These changes would have no effect on this game's other any percent category though. That's right, there are actually two separate any percent categories for Pokemon Channel, with each effectively being its own tier of pay to win. And the cost of running the main category is chump change compared to what's needed to run the fastest category of this game, which is the multiple consoles category. Initially, this was only a theoretical idea that was thrown around as a joke, but this joke became a reality on September 26th of 2016, when Prairie beat the old world record by 44 seconds with a time of 44:45. So what is it about having multiple consoles that makes running this game faster? Remember how I said how at the end of each in-game day, you have to close the game and change the console's time? Well, what if we could bypass that step entirely? This is where a second console comes into play. During the speedrun, there's a lot of downtime where runners are just sitting there watching episodes of the Pokemon anime. So during this time, runners can change the clock on another console to be ahead of the current console's time. So if the current console is set to January 1st of 2005, you can change the second console's time to January 1st of 2006. And then after saving the game, you can take out your memory card and put it in your second console, which would already have Pokemon Channel booted up. Because this is done while actively running the game, runners lose no time changing the game's clock, saving well over a minute compared to running with just one console. But the requirements for an optimal time become drastically more expensive compared to running the game with only one console. Let's take a look at everything you would need to speedrun this category. First off, you would need two consoles to do this, but instead of using two GameCubes, it's faster to have two Wiis instead. Now that the time for changing the console's clock is irrelevant, the Wii beats the GameCube due to having faster load times. While it is possible to do this run with only one GameCube controller, having a second one is a massive quality of life bonus as you won't have to scramble to disconnect and reconnect your controller, which may result in time loss. The next requirement for the run is to have a second copy of Pokemon Channel. Unlike the controller, you can't just eject the game and swap it over. You need to have the game loaded by the time you swap the memory card over. For memory cards, you thankfully only need one, as you can't just magically transfer the save from one memory card to another in a run. Since you actually need to see what's happening on both consoles, you need a second TV as well. Because of just how expensive this setup would be, it's simply stayed as a theoretical speedrun until Prairie took it upon himself to actually run the game with these fancy Wii strats. Initially, the community wasn't sure whether to make this a separate category or to put everything up as one category, but in the end, the community held a vote prompting the split between using a single console and using multiple consoles. It's so hilarious how out of all the games out there, Pokemon Channel of all things managed to become such a pay-to-win run between a Game Boy player of all things making the game load faster and needing two consoles for a separate category. What are some of the best pay-to-win elements you've seen in other runs? I'd love to hear some of the wacky ways you've seen speedrunners save time.